simple. Central banks have printed so much money that its value is plummeting. It's called inflation. So what is cryptocurrency? What is Bitcoin exactly? Well, we scoured the country for more than a year to find someone who could explain it to us, who really understood it and who had skin in the game. Michael Saylor is the man we found. There's really no one better, we've decided, to talk to you about this topic. Michael Saylor is an entrepreneur, a business executive. He's made billions in Bitcoin, and he's worth listening to on the topic. By the way, his company just dropped more than $400 million on it this afternoon. We sat down for more than an hour with Michael Saylor for a genuinely fascinating episode of Tucker Carlson Today. Here's a small part of it.
The currency is to the economy what your blood is to your body, and economic energy or money is to the currency what oxygen is to your blood. So common sense says, if I keep sucking the oxygen out of the room, if I suck the oxygen out of the room, you're going to either suffocate or freeze to death. And if I keep sucking the economic energy out of the currency, the economy collapses. In the extreme, you get ripped back to Stone Age barter, right? When the money doesn't work anymore, I have to trade you cigarettes for bullets. Right. And the problem with that is the economy becomes a million times less efficient, right? If you don't have money, now, how many countries in the world have a collapsed currency? 66 are dollarized. There's 180 about countries. There's 130 floating currencies. All of them are weaker than the dollar. The US dollar is the world's reserve currency. The US dollar is expanding. It was expanding 10% a year for a decade, now expanding at 14% a year. It expanded 34% over the past 12 months. The dollar is weakening. Okay, it's like the oxygen is getting sucked out of the room. So Tucker, if I told you the oxygen is getting sucked out of the room and there's an oxygen mask drops out of the ceiling over there, what would you do?
Run for it.
Yeah, put the oxygen mask on. Bitcoin is the oxygen mask. Bitcoin, the idea of Bitcoin, let's move to the third spot.
Let me pause and say, you've made the most compelling case I've ever heard for the need for something like Bitcoin. So you're saying, just to make sure that everyone's following this, the whole point of Bitcoin is to escape the inflation vortex that has consumed all these previous empires.
The point of Bitcoin is to fix the money. And money is energy, and energy is life. And if I keep sucking the energy out of the economy, I'm sucking the oxygen out of your system. Either, under the best case, you perform poorly. Under the worst case, I suffocate you to death or freeze you to death. That's the problem. That's why empires collapse. That's why economies collapse.
You probably haven't seen a conversation about economics that interesting ever. We certainly hadn't. And if you're wondering what is Bitcoin, what is crypto, or if you care about inflation, why are things suddenly more expensive, you need to watch that. It's over an hour long. Michael Saylor is his name. An amazing person. That's on Tucker Carlson Today at foxnation.com.
Happy Bitcoin Tuesday, freaks. It's your boy, Matt Odell, here for another Citadel Dispatch, the interactive live show about Bitcoin distributed systems, privacy, and open source software. That clip you just heard was MicroStrategy CEO and founder Michael Saylor on Tucker Carlson's Fox News show, explaining Bitcoin to him. Take it as you will. Huge shout out to the ride or dies who continue to support this show. You guys keep this show ad-free, sponsor-free, and focus purely on actionable Bitcoin discussion. I cannot thank you enough. The easiest way to support the show is through Podcasting 2.0 apps. My two favorites are Fountain Podcasts and Breeze. That's Breeze, Breez. You can search it in your favorite app store. All you have to do is search Citadel Dispatch, press that subscribe button, load it up with sats, and you can stream sats directly to my Lightning node to support the show. You can also support the show at citadeldispatch.com through Lightning or through my paynim, my Samurai paynim, which is Odell. Very easy to remember. So thank you all for supporting the show. Another huge shout out to the Ride or Die Freaks who join us every week in the live chat, which is accessible via Twitch, Twitter, or YouTube. You guys make the show special and unique. The questions you bring, the comments you bring, make these conversations more comprehensive than they would be otherwise. And I really do appreciate you. Thank you so much. Also, Citadel Dispatch hats are back on sale. Richardson hats were out of stock globally, and now they're back in stock. Shipping worldwide. Should be able to get to you by Christmas. So if you're interested, go to citadeldispatch.com/stack to get a hat. Also, huge shout outs to BTC Pins and Crypto Cloaks for making awesome Bitcoin merch. Not sponsors, but I like to shout out my favorite influencers when I get the opportunity to. So with all that said, this will be our fourth Bitcoin mining focused dispatch. The first one was Citadel Dispatch 5, where we briefly touched on mining, not very strongly. Then Citadel Dispatch 31 was like the getting started. So if you haven't listened to that, consider going and listening to that after this show. That's citadeldispatch.com/CD31. And then we had Citadel Dispatch 38, where we went more in depth on mining. And today we will be also going further into mining. And so I'm very excited about it. We have two return guests. I will start with them. We have Ronan Miner. Ronan, how's it going?
It's going all right.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us again.
Yeah.
And we have Big Kahuna. Big Kahuna, how's it going?
Hey guys, I'm doing all right. Currently recording from my truck because we have a house showing going on. So this is interesting.
Fuck yeah, we love that dedication. I met Big Kahuna in Austin a couple weeks ago. So I think this is our first show doing it since we met in person. So that's exciting.
Oh yeah.
And we have Daniel Frumkin, head of research and content at Slush. How's it going, Daniel?
Going very well. Thanks for having me, Matt.
We also have another guest, BTC Boulder, who is not here right now, but will hopefully join us further along into the conversation. So with all those introductions said, where do you guys want to start? I know the focus here to start off, or the focus here is going to be on securing the cheapest power possible. When you're talking about mining, you have two main costs. You have the actual hardware cost of the ASIC miners, and then you have the electric cost that you pay to run them. In the past, we have discussed securing miners and obtaining miners and trying to get the best price for them. And on this episode, we're going to try and start with a focus on obtaining the cheapest power. So where do you guys want to start on that?
I'd hand it off to Kahuna to go through that thread that he did. I think that was the catalyst for this whole thing.
Yeah, I guess what my thought was that just to start really, really high level, like, start from the top of the globe, bird's eye view, how you can get the cheapest power, and just like very slowly work down to a more granular level until we get to the residential, which is where I wrote that purchase power agreement thread, which kind of had some tips and tricks in there to kind of guide people on how to negotiate power with their energy service providers. So So like I was really hoping that BTC Boulder was going to be on, because he's an actual lineman, electrician. He works with like big power, and would probably have a lot of insights as we work our way down through this. But I guess like to start off, like obviously the best way to get cheap power is to position yourself near hydropower or geothermal or nuclear, something that is the cheapest. And I don't know, I guess Daniel, as you've been kind of exploring the world, I guess, do you have a list or an order of what powers are generally cheaper than others?
Well, I think it's a lot different for industrial scale miners versus home miners, because as a home miner, you're buying power from a utility company most likely, or almost definitely. So even if their energy source is like, regardless of whatever their energy source is, that's not necessarily going to dictate what your end price is as a consumer. Whereas at the industrial level, if they're working directly with the power company, then the hierarchy is more based on the cost of energy for whatever energy source. Interestingly, you mentioned geothermal, and I was just in El Salvador for the conferences there and talking to some people, and it sounded to me like the geothermal energy is actually not all that cheap, like maybe 7 to 8 cents per kilowatt hour, which could be profitable for a very long time with all the current conditions that we have. But I think ordinarily I would be recommending to people, at least mining at scale, to look for something like 6 cents per kilowatt hour as a good barrier for, or good threshold for being competitive long term. I think probably for at-home miners, that should be considerably higher than 6 cents per kilowatt hour, because it's just not realistic in most places. And you're probably mining for reasons besides just the mining profitability on its own. But that said, I would probably rank them as like actually maybe solar as the number one, which is very low on my list for industrial scale mining and very high on the list for at-home mining, because there's so many incentives that different companies or the government provides for doing solar panels on your roof at your home, that it typically makes sense to do solar panels if you're in a solar dense area like the Southwest or Florida or anywhere in the South, really. Then you would be sending power back to the grid ordinarily with that kind of deal. Any excess that you produce, you would sell to the grid, and you wouldn't get a necessarily great price for it. So mining Bitcoin with the excess on your at-home solar can actually make a lot of sense. Other than that, it's hard to say.
Daniel, let me just stop you really quick. So you work for Slush. You have this dashboard, insights.brains.com. And in classic Bitcoin fashion, that's brains with 2 eyes. Because no one in this space can name things in an easy way for someone on a podcast to talk about them.
Exactly.
This website is extremely detailed, and you have all these different stats on it. I pulled it up on. If you're watching the video stream, you can see it. I have it in the screen share, and you have the break-even electricity price of all the different top miners. So I'm seeing the S9. When you list the S9 here, is it running Brains custom firmware?
The break-even electricity price is stock firmware. So
at stock firmware, you break even at 15 cents a kilowatt hour.
Yep. So the Brains OS Plus column there is with an overclocking profile, which is actually not that much more efficient than the stock firmware because you're consuming so much more power. So the break-even electricity price is about the same or even potentially lower. But if you were to run the S9 at, for example, 800 or 900 watts instead of what we have there, which I think is 1400, then your break-even electricity price would be probably 2 or 3 cents higher.
Got it. So a lot of people So when we're talking about like at scale, like try and target a 6 cents kilowatt hour, 7 cents kilowatt hour, it's about maximizing profit, right? But you can, especially if you're a home miner, you can get away with significantly higher electricity rates. And if you value no KYC when it comes to stacking, I would say like you could even push it maybe even a little bit further past break even if that's something you value.
And a lot of these utility companies will just offer it up. If you just call your utility provider and just ask them what type of programs they have, and then you tell them what you have, they'll say, what do you fit into this type of category or that type of category? You can negotiate down for winter rates and different. Even so, just yesterday, a guy was explaining to me the rates that he's offered at his location, and he's just regular residential. He could get 5 cents a kilowatt hour for 21 hours a day during weekdays, but the other 3 hours a day during weekdays, he has to pay 36 cents a kilowatt hour. So then you have to kind of do your.
Shit.
Yeah, and then on the weekends, he gets 5 cents a kilowatt hour, 24 hours a day. So you kind of have to do your.
That's a bigger difference than I'd expect.
Yeah, but then you gotta, I don't know. And then I suppose you'd have to take into account like, all right, so you're gonna shut all your machines off for 3 hours a day. What kind of wear and tear does that do on your machines if you're powering them off and on every day? So
do you know what kind of wear and tear that does, Daniel?
No. Oh, okay, sorry.
Basically, we know it does some, but like nobody's willing to really share lifespan. Like the main people that we would get that information from are the ones doing the load balancing, like demand response stuff in ERCOT system in Texas and similar system in Illinois. But there's like it's not necessarily a good idea for any miners to share that data, because if they're participating in those programs and they share that data, then it would directly result in their hardware resale value going down, because then there would be like some sort of clause on any hardware sale where like this hardware was used in a demand response or just frequently powered on and off application, so its lifespan is probably going to be shorter and the value will be lower, and then they're not going to be able to resell it for as high of a price. So it's hard to get that information, but generally speaking, it's definitely not good. That's all we can say.
That's I never even thought about. I never even took that the resale value into consideration on that.
So, yeah, I mean the resale value is. A lot of people don't take the resale value into equation in the opposite direction in terms of when you're talking about profitability. I mean, you can mine these things, you can mine with these things for a couple of years and then resell them. What is that value at that point? It's a little bit harder to know that, obviously, but it's still going to have some value if you want to resell them.
Yeah, that's always kind of been my argument. I've probably said it in the past couple times I've been on is everyone goes with the ROI metric, whereas just because it's going to take you 10 months or 18 months or however you've figured out your quote ROI, you're not sitting on zero afterwards. Like you still have, like, even if you've gotten your return on investment, you still have a machine that's going to be worth a lot to someone, presumably.
So 100%. So Daniel, I saw a question on Twitter the other day, which is a question that I actually get a lot from freaks who reach out. You want to go into explaining why it's cheaper to buy 6 S9s versus an S19, even though the terahashes are the same?
Yeah, it's basically a matter of a difference in efficiency. So for you to produce 100 terahash with S9s, you have to consume it's like roughly 7,000 watts, maybe 8,000, depending on the quality of the S9s. Whereas to produce that same terahash with a S19 only requires about 3,300 watts. So it's like you get more BTC per watt of power that you're consuming, and that also means that the lifespan of your ASIC, in terms of not in terms of operating lifespan, but just like the profitable lifespan where you can run it at a certain electricity price, will be longer the more efficient it is. So the S19s are significantly more expensive because they're expected to remain profitable for much longer, and because they're going to help you stack much more BTC per watt of energy that you're consuming right away.
So like at the extreme, it's more worth it to get the new gen miners if your electric cost is higher, and it's better to get the old gen miners, something like a bunch of S9s, if you have free power or as close to free as possible.
Yeah, generally, if your power, even for a solid portion of the day, like 12 hours, if you have power for under like 3 cents per kilowatt hour, then you should almost definitely be going with something like an S9 or a M20S from WhatsMiner. Yeah, once you get above that, it becomes a lot more tricky, because the like break-even electricity price is only telling you day-to-day profitability. Like, can I make a profit by running this machine for the next 24 hours? But what it doesn't tell you is, will I actually make enough money to pay off the capex that I spent to get this machine in the first place? So it's not quite as simple as like,
so the break-even price you list does not include purchasing the miner.
Right. That's if you scroll up to the very top of this page, we have a profitability calculator, and we call it a profitability calculator just because that's what people are used to. But what it really is like a Bitcoin mining cash flow calculator. So in the advanced options on the inputs sidebar, if you open up advanced options down there, there's capex, starting hardware value, hardware appreciation or depreciation, infrastructure appreciation or depreciation, and then HODL ratio is for like if you want to keep a certain portion of your profits in BTC instead of selling into fiat. So yeah, exactly. So if you have a non-zero price increment in the basic options for BTC price, and then you have a HODL ratio, then you see the impact of like holding versus not holding. But for hardware value, that's part of the cash flow line. So once you input capex and hardware value, then the cash flow separates from the net profit loss, and then like your resale value of the hardware is factored into the cash flow. So as hardware depreciates, even though maybe it loses half of its value in a year if it's an old gen machine, I don't think that, like personally, I think that price growth will outpace difficulty growth in the near term, and hardware will actually get more expensive. So I think there's an interesting play of trying to trade the hardware, where you mine with it at home for a year and then you try to sell high on it. But anyway, yeah, it's hard to actually see the inputs. Let me go full screen.
Yeah, why isn't the graph changing? Am I fucking something up?
I don't know. I think actually it's because the hash rate and consumption are way too high. So it's like change the hash rate to 100 terahash and consumption to 3,000 watts, and then everything will be more proportional, and we'll be able to see stuff better. It'll reload better. I'm trying to get rid of the little, yeah, there we go. Okay, so now you can see hardware value, the yellow line, where it's losing about 50% of its value in that 12 months. The cash flow is the pink line that's increasing less rapidly than the net profit loss. And the reason for that is because while you're making that profit, the hardware is depreciating. So your cash flow, which includes the value of your assets, is not increasing as quickly as the amount of money that you're just making in general.
Got it. This is a pretty in-depth little calculator you guys got here.
Yeah, this was the first part of the project that we built, and it was I had a ton of spreadsheets, and I was trying to explain them to people who were like just getting into mining, just going through like cell by cell on Excel spreadsheets, like if I change this, then this is what happens, and so on and so on. And like nobody was understanding it. It was really difficult. And then at the same time that I was like had so many tabs open trying to keep track of stuff, I was just kind of like, this would be really useful for content if I could have visualizations for all of these like Excel spreadsheets that I can't even make charts for in Excel because none of them make sense. So yeah, it's I think the most advanced calculator out there on the market by far.
Well, we appreciate it. So what's your favorite part of the site? What's your favorite metric on the site?
My favorite little tool is at the very bottom. It's a power capacity widget where if you input a certain amount of power in megawatts, it will automatically update the chart and tell you how many miners you can fit in it and what amount of hash rate that those miners will generate. So the default we have in there is 2.5 megawatts, but if you change it to like 100 megawatts, then you'd see like, here's what the numbers that a large miner is working with when you get into the exahashes.
Why are there no what's miners here?
It's we have it filtered so that it's not super long, but at the top, right next to the power capacity input, you can change the hardware manufacturer.
And you have a show all button.
Yeah.
Does anyone use like Canon, eBay?
There are a couple of large miners with tens of thousands of Canons. I don't think anybody's using eBang or Inyo Silicon at any kind of scale anymore. But for sure, Canon has at least like, I would say like 100,000 of their new gen machines out there, something like that.
And that, yeah, I didn't realize that at all. That's not nothing. Before we move on from this website, you want to explain what the hell's in this chart, the hash value versus hash price? Like, I still don't get it. Like, there was a back and forth on Twitter.
Yeah, so I didn't even understand what people were confused about at first because I've been like in my little bubble of knowing what hash price is for a long time. People are confusing hash price with dollars per terahash capex for hardware. So I think it's because of the name price, and shout out to Ethan from Hash Rate Index. I'm pretty sure he's the one that came up with doing hash price as the name for this metric, and it just stuck, and now that's what we're using as well. But this is actually referring to the revenue generated per day by 1 terahash of hash rate. So it has nothing to do with the price of procuring that hash rate, of procuring an ASIC. It is just like the USD value per day of the revenue that you generate with 1 terahash. And then the hash value is the BTC value per day. So what you can see on this chart is that in July, when the China mining ban happened, hash value soared because difficulty went down. So when difficulty decreases, the amount of BTC that you generate per terahash goes up. But price was also going down at that same time. So the hash price was not going up at the same rate as the hash value. And then now we're going back to, they're converging now, and probably I would expect that hash value will overtake hash price, and eventually they'll be far separated, with hash price being, sorry, I think I mixed those up. Hash price will overtake hash value.
Ronan, do you understand this?
No, I thought it was I was reading it wrong this whole time. His initial explanation of what people think it is what I thought it was. I didn't know it was the difference between like, okay, you're mining this much BTC compared to you're mining this much fiat. And what I thought it was for how much dollars per terahash you're buying a machine compared to how many dollars you're making per terahash. So I was wrong
Right.
about it.
The
I
problem with
understand
that
what you're
is
saying
that
now, I think.
every machine has a different dollars per terahash capex number. So I want to come up with a better name for the capex version of it. But the like dollars per terahash to procure an ASIC is different for every single machine because like it depends also on the efficiency. It's not just a raw hash rate amount. So the dollars per terahash for an S19 will be significantly higher than the dollars per terahash for an S9 because the S19 is more efficient. So you're able to keep more of the BTC that you mine with each of those terahashes because you're consuming less energy in order to produce that BTC, and therefore you have to sell less of it to pay your power bills.
Which goes
So
right
there
back
is
to.
no.
Oh, I'm sorry for interrupting, but that goes right back to what you were explaining earlier on why a single S19J or whatever is better than 6 S9s.
Right.
For that exact reason, because dollar per terahash is totally different. You have the same amount of terahash, but you're paying different dollar amounts for it, and that does not equal what you're going to end up with.
Right, exactly.
Got it.
So what this chart really shows is just the impact of increasing difficulty and volatility in Bitcoin price on mining revenue.
Big Kahuna distracted me. Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, this chart is showing basically the impact of increasing difficulty over time, which is why hash value goes down, and then volatility in Bitcoin price, which is why there's volatility in the hash price over time. So increasing difficulty means decreasing hash value, and then if Bitcoin price increases faster proportional to difficulty, then hash price will go up, and if BTC price goes down or increases slower than difficulty, then hash price will go down.
Right.
So,
So then, why? Sorry, Ronan. Hit us, Ronan.
All right. So essentially, what you're saying is like a pool is a purchaser of your hash rate. You're selling your hash rate to that pool, and they're mining with it, and then they're giving you what you're owed for that amount of hash rate. And as network hash rate goes up, if your hash rate that you are selling to them stays stable, then your value of the hash rate that you're contributing goes down in value. But if the price of Bitcoin goes up, it starts to chase that back because you're being rewarded more for the hash rate, even if your hash rate stays stable.
Right. Exactly. So in pool terms, hash value is the only relevant metric because the pool is not paying you in USD or whatever your local fiat is. They're paying you in BTC. So just if you have a steady 1 terahash, then as difficulty goes up, your rewards from the pool will keep going down. But yeah, if Bitcoin price goes up enough, then your rewards in fiat terms can still keep going up even as they're going down in BTC terms. So, which is where like in calculations with mining profitability and like should I mine or not, there's 2 capex break-even points. One is the capex break-even in USD or whatever fiat terms, and the other one is in BTC terms. And I want to make a version of the calculator that's like a BTC maxi version where we do the capex break-even of like, if I spent this $12,000 just buying Bitcoin instead of mining, when would I make more Bitcoin from mining than I could have bought with that $12,000 in the beginning?
Right.
Well,
but
like that.
So in practice, it's kind of the same end result as what me and Ronan thought the chart showed to begin with.
Yes, that's why I didn't even like think about it that people were thinking of the other dollars per terahash because it does essentially show the same thing.
Like if you're long-term bullish on Bitcoin, you should be trying to buy miners when the blue line is lower than the orange line, the yellow line. Right?
I would say if you're long-term bullish on Bitcoin, you should be trying to buy miners just in general. But yeah, so basically if hash price is going up, then that means the value of the price that you have to pay for the machines will probably be going up as well. But if you already have them, then that means that the resale value is also going up. So like that's where I was saying before, if you can actually kind of imagine people starting to trade hardware on six month to 18-month timeframes, where like I could buy a machine expecting that in this next, let's say 18 months, Bitcoin price is going to increase faster than difficulty. If that happens, basically hash price will go up from where it is right now. And if hash price is up from where it is right now, then the machine value will be up from where it is right now. And I'll be able to resell it for more than I paid for it. And I'll keep all of the BTC that I mined in the process. So that's where it does show the exact same thing as what you were saying, because as hash price goes up, then the amount that you have to pay for hardware is going to go up too.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you for going through that with us. I've been very excited to talk to you about it on air since my confusion. We have BTC Boulder has joined us. How's it going, BTC Boulder? Welcome to the show.
How's it going? Good. Everything going to you guys? I was a little off on the time zones, but I'm here now.
Yeah, we figured out that it was a time zone issue. I don't know if we mentioned that it was Eastern time, but if we didn't, that's on us.
Yeah, no problem.
You want to introduce yourself to the freaks?
Yeah, it's the Daniel's first name, based out of here, Boulder. Long electrician now. I'm a union, utility power, high voltage, medium voltage, lower controls, fiber optic. Not too familiar with like the pricing structure on the. I know you guys are talking to the kilowatt hour, comparing them versus states and when you buy it, time of the week. Not too familiar with that aspect of it, but as far as the electrical install side, very familiar with it.
Do you have knowledge on like grids and stuff? Like, I mean, I know that like
the voltages they're running at and certain sections. Is that what you're referring to, or?
Yeah, I guess one of the things that I was hoping that you would be in the chat just so we could, confirm and deny some of this stuff. What I want to get into, I guess, Matt, are you okay with me just kind of going off on this?
Yeah, 100%, dude. Go for it.
Okay. All right. I didn't know if you had an agenda you were thinking or whatnot. Well, one thing that I found out that was pretty interesting when you're like kind of building up a mining operation, if you're in the middle of buttfuck nowhere in the middle of the woods, like that grid is powered differently than living in a city or living in like a business area. So if I lived out in the woods and wanted to run an operation with 10 S19s, the power provider might not even be able to give that to me because that would put too much strain on all my neighbors because there's not enough voltage running through those power lines. But if you live near a city or like in an industrial area, then that grid by default is more wired with higher voltage to actually support larger power draws. That's a correct assumption, right?
Yeah, it's really case by case on the area, because I mean you could be out in the middle of nowhere and it still has higher voltages that wouldn't be affected by you running some miners. Do you know what those voltage limits are? And I get really confused when it comes to like your grid voltages. Yeah, that's around like 13,000, and sometimes in the neighborhoods, I mean they'll break it down into just whatever transformers are set up on there, but it's 13,000 utility for the most part. That's for if it's like city to city, it's getting like in the 24,000 or higher range, but like I think what you're talking about, it could be up in the couple thousand range. A good way to look at it is the pole that's feeding it, and the style of like insulator and the size of the pole is a good way to determine potentially what it's feeding at, or the utility company will tell you what that area is getting fed with. And will the utility company be able to tell you?
I guess, your limit as a resident or as a business?
Yeah, and sometimes they'll do a transformer depending on the demand of it and what you're doing. Sometimes they'll upgrade their stuff, but I mean it's really case by case on your area and what you're thinking your demand is. But they'll definitely inform you on everything of what's being fed and voltages.
Would that be a transformer upgrade, not to your, well, okay, they can upgrade your pole if there's enough power on the power lines to get you more voltage to your house. But if they were to upgrade that whole power line, that'll likely require thicker gauged cables. And if you're the one driving that change, then they might ask you to cover that for the whole circuit.
Yeah, I think it's really on the situation to really answer that the best, because I've kind of seen it just all different ways when it comes to the responsibility of the utility or the property owner, or however they want to have the utilities fed in. Sometimes who's going to pay for it.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm probably breaking off on a little bit of a tangent here. When we first started, we were saying that like the best way to get the cheapest power is to position yourself near the cheapest energy. And obviously, a lot of people aren't going to be uprooting their house to move out to the middle of nowhere near a waterfall. And when you zoom in a little bit closer, the next step is to position yourself near power facilities or like cities, essentially, because if you're closer to the power facility, that's a cheaper delivery cost. Like these power providers actually charge you a fee to deliver electricity to your house, and my understanding is that delivery fee is directly proportional to the distance you are to the power generation site. And generally, if you're in the city, you're much closer, but if you're out in the woods, then you might have a higher delivery fee. And then taking that a step further, you might have a weaker, like a lower gauge power line set up, meaning that you can't scale up a huge operation in your pole barn because the grid in the woods is not good enough to do so. Is that all pretty correct to say that like your distance is directly proportional to that distribution fee that they're going to charge you?
Yeah, I thought it was so slight that you wouldn't even tell. I have some friends in the utilities in the metering that I could confirm that, but I was almost under the assumption that like if you're in like Excel Power or somewhere in Colorado, it's not like you're getting that much of a difference between how far over the powerhouse is and your house, like out in the middle of nowhere, versus someone in the city that's near the powerhouse, versus the kilowatt hour of the going rate of what they're showing and advertising.
Your kilowatt hours probably not affected that much, but they do tack on. So you have a base kilowatt hour for your capacity use, but then they tack on a distribution kilowatt hour. I'm going to share something. If I just post this in the Telegram, can you share it or can I pull it up?
Yeah, I can share it.
Okay. It's been interesting. What kind of led this idea was I made this big thread on power purchase agreements, and I don't know if you guys looked through it, but the idea was that I started looking at my residential power provider and just seeing what they offered, and I found out that it was all public information online. I could literally point to the power purchase agreement I wanted and say, yo, sign me up for this, and then they would charge me according to that. And this was really interesting to me because when I thought about this beforehand, I thought that if you're a massive operation, say Riot Blockchain, like you can call them up and negotiate a power agreement. But what I found is that for my company, it was all out there in the open. They had it all structured. You could pick what you wanted. And like, this is where you get into I think Ronan, he conned them into letting them say that he's heating his house with electric heaters, and that gave him a cheap rate. You like peak off peak power to get different rates.
So is this screenshot directly from your power provider's website?
So this is directly from my power provider, and this is what they give me. This is exactly what I will be paying unless I pick a different plan. And this is kind of hard to read. I feel like they almost do on purpose. But if you, I almost wish I could mark this up. If you just,
Yeah, so that delivery charges you're talking about there on the bottom, the distribution kilowatt hour.
Yep. So if you ignore the first 17 kilowatt hour portion and you just add up the capacity energy under additional and non-capacity energy under additional, and then that distribution number, that's going to be your kilowatt hour charge, and then they just tack on that service charge and whatever credit on top of it.
What does capacity and non-capacity mean? Do you know?
I don't know. Do you know, Boulder?
I was thinking about the time of day you're using it when it's at peak, like whenever the people are using more on the grid. That's what I was.
Okay.
So this is not peak off peak, because peak off peak is a different it's a different plan that you get to negotiate. Let me see. Capacity,
maybe how much you're using of it at a time.
When I called them, they told me that you just add those two numbers together. And I didn't really understand the capacity versus non-capacity. But
meaning that your true cost per kilowatt hour is the sum of those two numbers?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
What I have a question.
You're paying like 10 cents a kilowatt hour on your bill of 10.50.
And then you have that distribution. So it's like, 16, 17.
Oh, so your rate isn't nice.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Oh, I said nice because, yeah, never mind. But yeah, I mean, I thought you were paying significantly lower than what I've come to expect.
Nope.
But when you add it all up, then that's when it gets to that what you're expecting.
Right.
So with
and then I guess
I was going to say with Excel in Minnesota, they actually have two different charges. The bill looks similar to yours, which you have going on there, but you actually pay you pay a dollar amount per kilowatt, and then after that, it's almost like you pay a certain dollar amount per kilowatt, and then after that, you pay this amount per kilowatt hour at some really lowered rate. And I've never been able to understand what the difference is between kilowatt hour and kilowatts in general.
Kilowatt is that, I mean, that's best explained if you actually think about the peak power plan that I guess I discovered. So, okay, to kind of take this further, that's my standard bill. And what I found out is that you can negotiate or you can sign up for the peak power agreement. And how that works is you're essentially billed for the max amount of power that you use. So if you're running a welder and you turn it on for 10 minutes versus so in a standard bill, if you turn your welder on for 10 minutes, you're only charged for the 10 minutes that you're running that welder. If you go to a peak power agreement and you turn that welder on for 10 minutes, you're charged as if that welder was running 24/7 for for the entire month. And so that's what that kilowatt charge is that you're seeing, Neil. You're being charged as if you're running your max power amount 24/7. And you can kind of see how this would be really good for mining, right? Because if you're mining and you're getting charged 18 cents, like the bill we just showed up on the screen, that sucks. Like you're being charged 24/7, 18 cents per kilowatt hour. But if you go into a peak power agreement, they're going to bill you for your peak load for that month. So again, if you turn on your 10 S19s for 10 minutes, you'll be charged as if it's running 24/7. But you're going to be running that 24/7, and that allows me to get down to I think it was 8 cents. And I'm not actually running this, but I did the math, and I can actually share that if you want to pull it up.
So what you're saying, it makes it so that you can plan your expenses. You know exactly what it's going to cost you to run exactly how many you're running. And if you go over that, then you basically have to end up paying more because you went over the contract that you had with them. Is that what I'm understanding?
You're did my explanation make sense to most people? It sounds like I kind of got chopped up a little.
It made sense. I could try to summarize as like basically there's two really important figures. One is like kind of the base rate that you pay regardless, and then the other one is what is the maximum amount of energy that you consume at any point in time during that entire month or whatever the billing period is, because that will determine an amount that's added on to your base rate for the entire duration of the month. So if you were to just have a random blip where you consume an extra, like, let's say 3 kilowatts or something, that would actually significantly impact your bill, even if you're only consuming that extra amount for a few minutes because of the way that they structure the electricity pricing.
All right. That was kind of my understanding of it.
Yeah, so this is just like really interesting to me to find out. So I was relaying this on to a lot of people, and like people started hitting me up in DMs and Telegram, whatever, blah blah blah, and like just kind of zooming out and starting to look at this at different states. Like it seemed like in Michigan, which is where I'm at, a lot of this information was all public. You could just Google your energy provider rates and find all this information out there. But then you look into Ohio, I think Colorado, a lot of it was available, but like Ohio, they pretty much made you call them up to see what they could offer you. So it's kind of like a state by state, energy provider by provider. And I don't know if that means that these plans are already set up and you just need to call and ask for it. They're trying to hide it from you probably. Or if that means that it is a negotiation and you need to kind of talk through what you're doing before you can sign up for it.
That's the experience I've had is exactly that. You got to call and talk to them and figure it out. And like that example I had given earlier that somebody was asking me about, that sounded amazing, but like who would have guessed that they'd offer you 5 cents a kilowatt hour, 21 days or 21 hours a day on weekdays, but then they charge you 36 cents a kilowatt hour for the other 3 hours a day. Like that's just such an absurd plan, but that's offered to residential in that area.
Yeah, it might have been the same person. Somebody was telling me about that. They run for 21 hours and just turn it off.
Yeah.
It's basically they're building the demand response incentives in. So it's like the same kind of structure as ERCOT that miners are using at large scales, like hundreds of megawatts. But instead they're like building it in so that you're incentivized to shut off when they need the power for other people, and you're incentivized to consume when they have excess supply. So they're just like incentivizing you to be a demand response resource for them. It's actually kind of smart. I didn't know that was a thing.
I was
at residential scale.
When I've been talking to a lot of people about this, like just kind of thinking this through. Let's say you get home and it's time to cook dinner or something, and you go and you turn on your electric oven. Like you would almost want to turn off a miner to offset that added electricity cost when you turn on the oven, so that you're not running that oven for 10 minutes and then getting charged as if that was running 24/7. And then that's like the demand response that you're talking about. And then just because Crypto Cloaks is in the chat, I keep hounding him, telling him that he needs to take his mining and printing operation and find a peak power setup, because like if his miners are running 24/7, like that's a lot of power that adds up. And then his miners and his printers are running 24/7. Like that's kind of a match made in heaven, where the peak power is perfect for something like that.
They came out and boosted our drop, like the amount of power that they were willing to drop to us. They did it for free because they want people. They put in the whole new service and everything for us because you're a customer, and they know that they can sell you electric, and you just tell them what you're doing and you level with them, And they're going to actually protect you then after that too, because now you're a customer that's buying their electric from them, and they don't have any, there's no incentive for them to like go and be like, oh yeah, these guys are doing this, and I don't know if they're paying their taxes or not or whatever, which we are, but like you're kind of, they'll protect you because they want your money. They're just like any other business.
It kind of like going off of this. I'd like to hear your story on this, Ronan. When I was looking at my bill, there's parts in there that there's incentives or discounts where if you are heating your house with an electric heater, or if you are heating, like doing an electric water heater, you can get discounts from that. And I think I heard that you somehow negotiated with them that you are heating your house with electric heater, which we all know you're just trying to set your house on fire with miners in the basement.
Yeah, no, that wasn't even a negotiation. That was one of those times where I just I called the local power utility. I got a condo, doesn't take much to heat, threw a couple S9s in there, called them, and I said, hey, I'm going to be using electric space heaters all winter long. And they're like, well, how much natural gas are you going to be using? I was rehabbing the place at the time, so I said 0. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's totally fine. But then I asked them, and I go, well, what? Because I have a gas stove, a gas water heater. And I said, well, it gets really cold in Minnesota. So what happens if my furnace has to kick on? And they go, we'll see that. And we can match that with what the temperature was out that day. We'll know what you're using gas on and the quantity of gas you're using. And from what we can tell is your electric use is stable and regular. So we'll drop your electric rate down to 6 cents a kilowatt hour between October and May. So there you go. You got half the year, more than half the year, that you get 6 cents a kilowatt hour. And that includes everything. Your television running, your fans, everything that you have going on in your house. All the electric you use also gets dropped too, but mainly.
Yeah, I haven't ran these numbers, but what you're looking at on the screen is the same residential bill, but then they have their rates for space heating.
But it's about the same. It's like coming out to 17 cents a kilowatt hour, a little bit above, right?
But if you look at the colder, like November through May, it looks like a lot of it drops. And
it drops significantly.
Yeah.
Then you're looking at like 11 cents a kilowatt hour.
And those are also the times that gas prices would normally be going up. So you're also eliminating that because you're not running your natural gas furnace. So that's a whole other expense that you no longer have. So, I mean, you're saving on 2 different fronts.
In Boulder, in your experience, I mean, is it like just the general rule of thumb, like the electricity provider just wants you to use energy? Like all these incentives are saying, don't use gas, use our electricity. I mean, it's in their best interest. You're incentivized to just like burn through their electricity that they're providing you. I don't know if there's any like anomalies to that.
No, that's what I've seen. I mean, I haven't studied too far into it, but I'll definitely talk to someone I know who works for the utility company now that I know some more of the specifics of the questions you guys are looking into. But I definitely know some people who work for the local power companies in this area and work with metering and are familiar with that. So I'll definitely, maybe even if you guys have another one of these, I could bring them on, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'd also be curious if if there is room for negotiation in any of these, because I just kind of think that these companies have a file on their desktop that they open up and say, well, yeah, we can give you this, and this.
Yeah, it seems like with this person, it'd definitely be a good one to find that out because she works with them, so it'd definitely be a good start to get some information on that.
And they're usually very willing to help. Every time I've ever called anyone, whether it be to get a new service drop that's 2 or 3 times the size of what we have, or just try to see if they have any residential deals that they're willing to offer, like they'll just pull it up and look at it and help you out. They don't They don't care. They like talking about this type of stuff. So it's easy. Even if you don't know, even if you haven't done the research online yourself to figure out what you're asking for, they'll tell you what's available.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I found out how to read the freaking bill. They just like, I called them up and they broke it down for me. Some BTC Pins actually sent me a link that shows the difference between capacity and non-capacity. I can share it, but I'll read it off real quick. Forward. Where are we at? Okay, so it says power supply charge, a portion of the cost of generating the energy that you use to power all the lights and appliances in your home. Your power supply charge was previously presented as one line item. Beginning in May 2018, your power supply charge was split into two line items labeled as capacity and non-capacity charges on the bill. This follows Michigan's new energy policy and will allow DTE to charge electric choice customers for their portion of capacity costs without impacting the customers. So it seems like it's just a way to split it for their own accounting.
Non-capacity is variable and capacity is fixed.
Ooh, yep, okay.
I'm just reading from what you read from, but that's the TLDR. I think they try and make these bills as complicated as possible.
And it depends on what level you're working on. Like residential, you're not going to get away with a whole lot of messing around. They'll tell you what you can get. You move up to commercial. Okay, if you're using a little more than typical commercial, or you're using it on a more regular time frame, like you can actually tell them, I'm going to use this much over this period of time, then they'll do something for you. And then you move up to industrial, it's like the sky's the limit. They don't even care. They're like, all right, give me $20,000 a month and we don't care what you use. Or something like that.
Were you able to run, so you are running 2 meters at your house, as I understand, and you just have like a separate area with a separate meter. And so when you called them up, they just installed a separate business meter for you?
No. It went a weird way. There was a pole barn on the property with a service to it first, which had its own meter. And then a house was built on it afterwards. And they were required by law to run a meter to the house, or run a service to the house and put in its new meter. But it was only because it went in that order were we allowed 2 meters on the same property. Because otherwise it has to be a dual residence. Like the only way you could get otherwise, like only like a duplex could get 2 drops. Like they won't run a separate meter out to your pole barn if your pole barn was built after your house. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I've heard stories of people being able to get 2 meters ran at their house. I don't know
if you have some kind of farm implementation, or you actually are running a business off of your property as well, then you can get it. But just as a straight residential, you can't. And so the only thing we did was we took the existing, I think it was 100 amp or something like that, that was going to the pole barn, and we just boosted it as high as they would let us go. And then since it's all run underground, it's called a drop, but it's not a drop because it was all run underground. And they were like, yeah, we're not replacing the wires. It's too expensive. We'll do it for free, but we're not replacing the underground wires. But we will come out if it burns up and replace it for free. Otherwise, you can up the service now, and you have to pay for it. And we were just like, yeah, fuck it, we'll burn it up.
I know that at least from my understanding, it's pretty easy to get like a business meter installed. Like if you're trying to do something in your garage, you can have them come out and install a 200 amp service. But I don't know what the requirements are for that business. Like you just need to have an LLC or like whatever bullshit.
It definitely has to be a detached building. It can't be attached to your home.
That's one that's been I've been wondering about. I don't know how that works because a lot of these good deals, these peak power deals that I'm talking about, the best ones are in their business rates, and so you'd have to have your own separate meter or like convince them that you are a business of some sort.
Yep, you'd have to register it as a business. It would have to be a detached building. Like if you had a detached garage or something like that, you could do it like that. But it has to both be physically detached and also be on a totally different, like under an LLC of some sort or something like that.
Gotcha. And I wonder if that's state by state.
It probably is.
I'm not sure. I guess I'm not sure if there's any more questions or comments on the PPA, but I guess I have something that we could dive into that I think Daniel might have some good comments on.
Hit us.
So looking through the different offers that show up on my energy plan, one of them is like your peak off peak power, and what this means is that if you're running a miner at night, it's going to be a cheaper energy rate than if you run it during the day, and that's to pretty much incentivize grid balancing, like we were just talking about, because they know that everyone's going to be at home on the weekends or whatever during the day, running showers, whatever, getting ready for work. But at night, when everyone's sleeping, all the lights are off, everything's off. There's not a lot of power demand, and I guess when people see this, like a lot of the times they're like, well, I'll just run my miner at night and I'll turn it off during the day and I'll just maximize the cheapest power that I can get and go from there. I think Dan knows where I'm going with this, but he wrote an article on this that I think would be interesting to talk through.
Yeah, perfect setup for the firmware shill. I was waiting for it. So basically, in that scenario that you were describing, I don't think in most cases that it would make sense for you to actually shut off the miners during the more expensive time periods. I think using a firmware like BrainsOS Plus more strategically is a really good way to become competitive with the larger scale miners, even when you don't have the benefit of cheaper electricity like they do. And what I basically the idea would be you play the efficiency game when your electricity is more expensive, and you just maximize your hash rate when it's less expensive. So during those nighttime hours, you would overclock with BrainsOS Plus. Like for example, with an S9, you'd do it maybe 1400 watts. You might get 17 terahash per S9. And then during the daytime hours when your electricity is more expensive, you would do the opposite. You would undervolt it down to maybe about 800 or 900 watts. And you would determine the right power setting. You just experiment with some different settings with every machine, and the auto tuning process would kind of find what's optimal. So maybe some S9s you would have 800 watts would be perfect, whereas other ones 900 watts would be perfect. That's just going to vary from machine to machine. But at the end of the day, what you would do is just you would go for trying to get down to like 75 watts per terahash with the kind of maximum efficiency that you can get from an S9 when your electricity is more expensive. And that way, you're consuming less electricity overall, so your total cost is lower, and then you're also running at a more efficient power setting, so then the amount of your profit margin basically during that time is better. And then when you have that cheap off-peak power, you just want to maximize the amount of BTC that you mine, and you don't care as much about how much power you're consuming because it's not going to cost you as much. So then you change your power settings to overclocking. And you could just have a couple of Python scripts that automatically do this, like at 8 p.m., increase power input to 1400 watts. At 6 a.m. or whatever it is, decrease power input to 800 watts. And you could automate the whole thing so that you play the peak off-peak power pricing differently, and you maximize for efficiency when you need the lower your electricity bills, and you maximize for hash rate when you want to mine more BTC on cheaper power.
And then since you're not turning them off and turning them back on again, you're not running into that same destructive
lifespan.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. Yep. That's a huge part, even for, I think, the demand response resource, the miners that are doing this at larger scales, like in the dozens of megawatts or even the hundreds of megawatts. If they're participating in demand response programs where they're shutting off every single day, they probably make a lot of money to shut off. So most of the time they're going to be incentivized to just completely stop consuming power for whatever amount of time that they can get paid so much by the utility for not consuming. But when you factor in lifespan, which we don't know exactly what the impact of consistently shutting on and off does, but it could be rather significant. And in that case, then it might make more sense to just decrease the power input per machine as low as it can possibly be, but keep them running so that you don't deal with the thermal cycling where the machine shuts off completely and then it cools off and then it turns back on and heats back up, and the silicon gets expanded and retracted and expanded and retracted, and eventually that wears on it. So yeah, I think like every single operation is going to have different requirements for that, but there's so much room for optimization in terms of how you consume energy at different times of the day, depending on the amount of energy you have available and the price.
My understanding is that's why like a lot of the S17s had issues, is because they'd turn off and that excess heat sitting there would just not get dissipated, and it would eat through a lot of the thermal paste. Holding those.
They were weren't they just shit pieces of hardware?
They were shit pieces of hardware.
Yeah.
You get them brand new out of the box. You take a fan off, you could pour the heat sinks out of them. Brand new from the factory line. They were garbage.
I think it was really bad paste, or they used something different.
They changed from, I don't remember if it was like thermal glue to thermal paste or what, but they basically used a much cheaper material to attach the heat sinks to the hash boards. And then heat sinks kept falling off, or they just weren't as thermally conductive. And so like the heat wasn't dissipating, and then the machines overheat, and that causes all kinds of problems.
They're a piece of shit. So Daniel, on Citadel Dispatch 38, we had Jan on. We talked at length about Brains, this custom firmware you guys ship that makes your Bitmain miners significantly better. But I come from the perspective that MicroBT What's miners are just better hardware. Where do you stand in terms of like evaluating the equation between buying Bitmain hardware specifically so you can run Brains on it versus investing in MicroBT What's miners and just hoping that you guys ship Brains eventually?
Yeah, the Win What's Miner thing has become a somewhat painful meme at this point. Like we're so close, but I've thought that for a long time. So I don't want to say anything. It's just soon TM.
Okay, so you should just wing it and buy a What's miner.
Yeah, at least on the M21 and the M20, which is the mid generation, I think that we will have those soon TM. As far as I know, we already have it hashing. The firmware is hashing on M30 and M31, M30 S Plus as well. But I would imagine that it's like once we get the M20 and M21 out, it will probably still be a few months before we get the new generation stuff out. So if you're buying the new gen stuff, then I like optimistically end of Q1. But I shouldn't even say anything like that. Like just it'll be a few months. Yeah, yeah, 2 weeks exactly. I saw the Crypto Cloaks asked about S19J, and I don't know if we have the J as part of this, but I do know that we're very close on the S19J Pro. which I think in our next firmware build that we release, I think we will have a more stable build for S19, T19, and S19 Pro, which are already in public beta right now. But we'll also include, I think, a beta for the S19J Pro. Hopefully that also includes S19J.
Do you think these mining manufacturers will ever improve their naming scheme, or are we just fucked?
No. I wish that they would also just stop producing so many random variants that just have like one or two things
That
different,
drives me nuts.
every time that there's a new one,
I have an M32 46 terahash. I have M32 62 terahash. I have M32 68 terahash. Like,
it gets to the point where you don't even know what miners you own. You have to go check.
I literally have no idea anymore. I have to go take
our larger clients, and we're trying to get them the firmware, and it's like we have to ask so many questions just to figure out which firmware to give them, because it's like, which control board version do you have? Which EEPROM chip is on the control board? Do you have the 96 terahash version or the 100 terahash version, or is it the 102 terahash version, or do you actually have like the J and you just told us it was the base model, but that's because you didn't realize how much complication that there is involved with like each individual subvariant has slightly different architecture that we have to account for, and it's such a mess. WhatsMiner I think is a little bit better than Bitmain, because Bitmain, like, there's at least, I think, 9 or 10 different subvariants of the S19 already, if not more. And there was just like a random S19A. I just saw that 1 or 2 weeks ago.
I don't know what that is.
I have no idea what that is.
Does anyone even know what that is?
Nope.
It seems to be the same terahash as something else.
But then even with Bitmain, like the M30s have, am I correct that the M30s have higher terahash than the M31s?
Means?
Yeah. M31 is kind of the equivalence of the like T19, whereas
but like that doesn't make any sense. The number's
S19.
higher, the model number's higher, but the terahash is less.
Yeah. Same with the M21 and M20. The M20 is a better machine. It's like they use the leftover chips. I think that's what it is.
46 terahash M32. Everyone I've had has failed. It's the only WhatsMiners I've ever had that failed.
With the M32s?
The M32 46 terahash.
I didn't even know the M32 existed.
I think that the M32 actually kind of belongs in the M20 generation. From like what I've read about it, it sounded like the M30 generation is really like M30, M30S, or M30S, M30S Plus, M30S Plus Plus, M31, and M31S Plus. But the M32 is made with the same chips. I might be wrong about this, but I think it's made with the same chips as the M20 generation. So but for some reason, it's named M32.
Do you have any idea exactly how they decide what is what? Because I'd heard, and I mean, this is just absolutely.
They use a dartboard.
Yeah,
no.
Drink a bunch of Baijiu and just
hearsay is in the manufacture of the chips. They get chips that are this, and they get chips that are that. So they decide which chips go on which boards, and then they're like, okay, these ones are closest to 46 terahash, so let's make a machine that's that. These ones are closer to 62 terahash, so let's make a machine that's like that. Because if you've noticed, like, plugging in some of these machines, like, some of them are just animals, and I can't figure out why. Like, you plug in a 68 terahash M32, the thing it runs at 60 or it runs at 80 terahash its entire life, and it's just fine. Like, I have no idea why this happened.
They just like fucked it up.
Oh, it's because there's no quality control.
That's why the firmware is such a big value add, because like their firmware is just the absolute same for every single model, but no model is actually the same. Like you can get 2 different M32s, and one of them is a workhorse and the other one is a piece of shit. And like the firmware that comes on them is just going to treat them the same. Whereas maybe you run brains on those, like we don't have it for the M32S yet, but like maybe you get an old beat up S9 that's on its last leg, and you get another S9 that's like still got 5 years left in it, and brains will figure out, okay, we can give way more higher frequencies and voltages to this kind of newer S9, and we'll give much lower to this older S9. And yeah, we're not going to get as much hash rate from this older S9, but at least we're not going to break it, and it's going to run as efficiently as it can. And like the firmware that comes on them is just, it's like treating individual little snowflakes as all the same. That said, from what I know, the WhatsMiner firmware is actually more sophisticated than the Bitmain firmware. But I don't know if they have like the sophistication of figuring out optimal frequencies and voltages. But there's something to do with the WhatsMiner chips. They only really hash effectively in certain temperature ranges. So you kind of have to do some sort of tuning process just to get them hashing in the first place that isn't involved with Bitmain. Like Bitmain, as long as it's above a certain temperature where it's like safe to run, and below a certain temperature where it becomes dangerous, then they'll hash. Whereas that effective temperature range for WhatsMiners is apparently a lot smaller. So they have something going on in their firmware that's already doing some sort of tuning.
I've also seen if it depends on what machines you're partnering your machines with. The WhatsMiner doesn't seem to be such a big deal, but like S19J or an S19 Pro don't work very well next to each other because they have different, I don't know if it's temperature sensors in them that will shut them down, but like one will be sucking in the other one's heat, or however the airflow works. I can't exactly describe it, but one will not run next to the other. But as soon as you replace the one with an identical model, then they're just fine.
Interesting. I never heard about
crazy. That. I know it sounds crazy, but yeah.
This is why Ronan's my favorite Bitcoin miner in the space. He just like downs 15 White Claws and just places miners next to each other and sees what happens.
Yeah, plug them all in. Let's throw a half a dozen WhatsMiners next to some S19s. See what happens.
So I want to bring BTC Boulder back into this conversation. Boulder, we were talking about three-phase supply before you joined. Before we even went live, we were talking about it. Neil brought it up. Ronan Miner brought it up. Ronan, you want to hit him with the question that you had? I mean, I just pulled up the question that Uber Ponage posted. He didn't actually post a question. He just said that three-phase supply is better. What was your question again about three-phase? I have no idea about any of this.
Yeah,
motors do run better on three-phase on higher voltage. Motors do run better, and I guess is for efficiency on cooling? I guess is that the biggest.
What is three-phase? What are we even talking about?
Is everything in a house? Everything in a house is two-phase, right?
Yes.
No, it's single phase.
Single phase.
Can you give the low
Well,
level
it's two phases, but it's called single phase.
Yeah,
it's called single phase, but it's two phases.
Yeah, and then so like every leg is 120 volts. So if you want two,
if it's in residential,
volts, yeah. But if you want to run a miner or a stove or something like that, you have to have 220 or 240. So you have to hit both those legs. Three-phase comes in as three legs, and then
so is it three sets of 120?
Yeah. So, but you have to balance it. You can't just tap into one 120 and then another 120 and leave the third leg of 120 vacant. It won't work. So if you have three-phase, you have to run three miners, three. And you do leg one and leg two and leg three, and then leg one and leg three. So you get your 240 to each of those miners. But my question was, what's the benefit and what's the best way to do it? I don't get that.
Can I before we go into I'm super curious about this too, but can I kind of ground people on this a little bit?
Yeah. Was that pun intended?
Oh, okay. All right. I'm trying to find a photo to share up here, but when you in the United States, when you have a breaker panel,
Big Kahuna's the worst for the podcast listeners, because every time he comes on, he just wants to share all the photos, but I do appreciate it.
Man, I mean, this shit's so complicated. Like, if you're just listening, I don't know.
Shared a little drawing.
Especially if you guys are like multitasking, you're probably zoning out, falling asleep. Anyways, so if I understand it correctly, in the United States, all your residential power is 110, and if the way that works is you have your power lines and you got your transformer, and I believe all the transformer is doing is it's scaling down the amperage so that it can bring it into your house, because if there's too much amperage in your house,
scaling down the voltage
to bring it in your house. So you got a transformer, and what happens is out of this transformer is 2 wires, and these 2 wires go directly into your breaker, and each of those wires is a 110 and a 110.
to ground.
It's a 110 and a 110 and a ground is what's coming in the wire.
No, 110 to ground to each phase, and then when you go phase to phase, you get the 240 or the 208, depending on if it's commercial or residential.
Man, this is where I get a little bit lost. But so you have the 2 110s in there, and then like you got to pretty much combine them to make your 220 or 240, yes. I guess. And that's when you power your electric range, your electric oven, your Bitcoin miners. But when you're just doing like a standard outlet for your phone, it only takes one of those legs and pushes that through your circuit.
A neutral. Yeah, one of those legs and a neutral back to ground.
Okay. So when you're doing 3-phase, you get 3 legs that come from your transformer. Is it a 110, 110, 110 or?
Yes.
Okay, and then you just have to do some
like ground, really
wonky shit.
Yes,
to
be more specific.
That.
Yeah, each phase of it, yeah, 120 to ground is what it is, and then each phase to phase is 240 or 208, depending.
I gotta interrupt you for just a second, Boulder, just so that everyone knows this. Do not work on this information. Hire a professional electrician.
Yes.
Just so you get some sort of basic understanding.
But this is so you know what to talk to the electrician about.
Exactly.
But like a licensed electrician is fairly cheap in the scheme of things, and well worth it. Do not kill yourself.
Yeah, it causes a lot of damage to expensive
So if you bring in a licensed electrician and you tell him, okay, I have this Bitcoin miner, or if you want to say, like, I have this server that needs 220, he's going to probably default to 2-phase, right?
Whatever the equipment's running on and what it calls for in the power supply of the miner.
I guess that was my original question, and I think maybe Matt was alluding to when he asked me what my question was what is the benefit to 3-phase?
Yeah.
It higher voltage runs higher efficiency.
Okay, so it's watts divided by
like
volts
if you had
equals
like
amps.
If you were able to get 480 volt miners, it seems like that would be ideal. It'd run more efficiently, but I haven't looked into to see if they ever make those or the power supplies or
what it would entail. They don't, but that's the equation that you work with is watts divided by volts equals amps. So as long as you can kick up those volts, you're using less amps, and amps are what you pay for in the end. Like kilowatts are essentially just another version of amps. So you're not taking in the quantity amount of electric. You're just taking it in faster, and you're taking it in potentially higher.
It's more efficient. It's more efficient to run it at higher voltages.
Okay, that's what I was always wondering, because that's why data centers all run 3-phase. And then why do I not understand if it's 208, 3
Well, I guess for an
phase,
example on it, like I guess one example would be like some massive motors that I run. If they were to have the horsepower, if you were doing them at 120 volts, these massive motors that are
Did I lose him?
oh, I was gonna say, did I freeze?
No, we all lost him. Big Motor didn't want him to continue his conversation.
Yeah, no shit. So efficiency gains, I get that, and that's why I assume that's why data centers run on 3-phase. But I've talked to plenty of people that do that, and I just never knew exactly why, and I couldn't understand what the trade-offs were. I knew there had to have been trade-offs, like running single phase is easy, running 3-phase far more difficult.
I don't know what he means by efficiency gains, though. Like,
because you're taking in less amps.
I mean, if you're just looking at P equals IV, right, you have a much higher voltage that allows you have a constant power. Your miner always wants to consume a certain amount of power. You have your higher voltage that gives you a lower amperage draw. So I assume that means you can have much lower amp breakers.
Yeah, you're consuming less power, because power is actually measured in amps, not volts or anything like that. Like your consumption doesn't matter how many volts you consume. It's measuring how many amps you consume. That's what you're paying for.
Boulder's back now. What's up, Boulder? We lost you there.
what did I cut out at?
We lost you when you were saying if you're running a big motor.
It's running more efficiently at the higher voltage, but it's still as much as you're getting charged as the kilowatt on it. But it's more just the efficiency of the equipment you're running with it. I think is the higher voltages where it's beneficial.
When you say efficiency, are you referring to a lower amperage?
No, the efficiency of like where you're losing electricity in delivering what it's getting before it gets used. Like your loss of electricity is less when you're using higher voltage because you're losing it via resistance of wire.
Let me ask this. Okay, so when you look at a miner, like if you pull up a miner graph, I don't know if I have one up, you see that the terahash just goes like the variance is pretty crazy. Like if you're running a 100 terahash miner, you can see that it's going way high and way low. Is that due to inefficiencies in the...
That's just share submissions. That's the variance, like just inherent to mining, because the pool is measuring the hash rate of a miner based on like they're only receiving maybe one in every few 100 trillion hashes that the miner is doing. And that's how the pool can like validate each share that's being submitted without doing the same amount of proof of work as the actual miners are doing and consuming all of that energy a second time.
Okay, let me take it a step further. If I plug my phone in, am I getting like a different... Am I getting like a sine wave of different voltages going through that, and it's charging at different speeds depending on what's going through there?
You're saying efficiency on how you're plugging your phone in?
I guess I'm just trying to understand. I don't get it. I'm gonna shut up now.
I think it's power loss when you're delivering it at like higher levels of energy, that you're losing it. You're not getting it as much of it to the actual use of it versus power loss of other electrical resistance you're getting.
So what's the difference between those two? Like how much power are you losing with 1-phase or 2-phase relative to 3-phase?
You're losing more when you're running at higher amperages.
So it's an equation. Watts divided by volts equals amps. So if you want to keep your amps stable, because that's the amps you need to run the machine, and you want to divide the watts by volts, when you increase the volts, which three-phase does, then you're saving on efficiency. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the less amperage you use, the more efficient you'll run, because you're not losing it as much with the electrical system.
Exactly. Moving on.
Has anybody ever tried batteries as far as trying to balance out whenever the electricity is more expensive and trying to have it where you're charging up batteries when it's the less?
Why wouldn't you just run the ASICs when it's cheaper?
Run the ASICs and the batteries. So you're charging the batteries and you're running the ASICs, and then you switch over to the batteries whenever it gets expensive, but you don't have to kill the ASICs. You can run them full speed and just switch over to battery.
Wouldn't it be cheaper to just get more ASICs?
Yeah, and you're killing the batteries, and those are going to need to be replaced, and there is always storage loss. So it's not one for one. It's not like you're charging the battery up and it's giving you back the same amount of power later.
You're better off just buying more miners and running them during the cheap air times, right?
Yeah, and then shutting them off.
Or overclocking with Brains Plus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because what's the storage loss on a typical battery is insane, isn't it?
It's terrible. That's why wind and solar don't make any sense.
They make a little bit more sense in a Bitcoin world, though, don't they?
I would say so, yeah.
Not
because
batteries.
you can mine with them instead of using batteries.
Yeah, but not batteries. I thought you meant that batteries make a little more sense in this.
No. Wind and solar make more sense in a Bitcoin world.
Yeah.
But you still need a grid connection there. That's the big thing is this is actually the same exact type of thing that miners would have to figure out with their local utility provider if they were trying to mine with a solar farm or a wind farm at a larger scale, is what are we going to be paying when we're consuming from the grid, and then do we tie into the grid for being able to send power back to it during the peak production times, or are we just a consumer from the grid, and then we have to figure out how much we're consuming at any given time based on how much solar or wind we're producing, and then our grid rate is going to be different from our solar rate or our wind rate, and then maybe also on top of that our grid rate is going to change at different times of the day based on peak and off peak, and we also are going to have some demand charge if we're consuming based on whatever the maximum amount that we consume from the grid is. And that's where anybody trying to mine on solar or wind will actually at least want to look into batteries as a way of reducing that demand charge, because it may make sense that in order to maintain 100% uptime with all of your miners, you might want to have just maybe 20% or so of your total energy production capacity that you store in batteries, just so that you don't ever have to increase above your maximum threshold that you're consuming from the grid, so that your demand charge stays lower. But yeah, at home, I don't think batteries would make much sense unless you have some solar panels on your roof and you have a bunch of batteries and you're mining fully from the solar power plus battery power.
Wouldn't that be what Brains is for, though? So if you have peak and off peak, whether the wind goes down, or if you're on your own solar wind farm, your miners can overclock when there's plenty of available energy, and then isn't that what you were talking about with the Brains systems that can do that?
It's getting more complicated with figuring out how to balance CapEx with OpEx, because it may be the case that in order for you to buy the amount of miners that it would take to fully consume that peak power production, let's say it's a solar farm and you have 8 hours per day that you're producing a peak amount, and then the rest of the day you're producing much less or none at all. maybe it will make more sense from a like risk perspective and just a general investment perspective to buy a little bit of battery capacity, just so that you don't have to buy as many miners, and you can reduce the total amount that you're ever consuming from the grid, so that your grid electricity rate is lower for the 12 to 14 hours a day that you're consuming from the grid. So maybe like you have batteries that are 20% of the total capacity that you need to consume in a day, and you just run on that battery power to keep all of your miners online when you're on pure grid power otherwise. And that way the amount that you're consuming from the grid is lower, and then your grid electricity price is lower because your demand charge isn't as high.
I just feel like that's so much extra build out, so much extra infrastructure that you're going to have to take care of. Like even if you had solar panels during the day that did well, and then maybe you're built on a coastal town where it's really windy at night or something, so you can kind of balance that with whatever type of firmware you have that you can plan for that. I just think that building out that type of infrastructure is going to cost you more than just buying from the grid in the first place. So maybe hydro and things like that are a little more reliable.
Well, the government kind of screws it up with offering a lot of incentives, I think, for
I don't believe
solar
that.
and wind in particular.
The government screws it up.
Yeah. I think.
But what you're saying is like if you get a subsidy for installing the solar, then it could be worth it.
Yeah. And not that I necessarily would support that, but like just from a mining perspective, if you can work something out where you can mine profitably for many years, then whatever it takes to do that, I would do it. And I think for sure at an at-home scale, if you live in a place with high solar density, like I'm from New Mexico, there's solar panels on a lot of roofs in the houses in New Mexico because we get sunshine like 300 something days per year, and it's relatively high intensity. Like the price that you pay for electricity in general when you install solar panels goes down significantly. There's already really good incentives to do it, even if you don't factor in Bitcoin mining. But if you just like replace selling to the grid when you're producing extra with mining Bitcoin instead, I think it could make a whole lot of sense if you're using low capex machines like S9s and M20Ss, so that you're not like taking on a ton of extra risk when you do the mining portion of it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. There are a shit ton of like subsidies and incentives to get people to do solar, and I don't understand why you would ever sell it back to the grid if you can mine.
Right.
Because they give you like a shit price too.
Yep. The break-even electricity price is basically the price that the amount of revenue that you're making per kilowatt hour. So that's what you can view it like. Just the trade-off is if I sell it back to the grid, whatever they're willing to buy it for, it's probably going to be like 3 or 4 cents per kilowatt hour because they still want to make a margin on it. If you can mine at like 13, 14, 15 cents per kilowatt hour of revenue, then you might as well be mining with all that excess and just never sell any back to the grid. And maybe even it would make sense to overbuild your solar panels so that you have more, and then you can have a few extra miners there, and then maybe like you have a little battery system too, and you're consuming from the grid at night, and you have a 24/7 uptime mining operation at your home where your electricity price is considerably lower than it would be if you were just using the utility because you have that solar.
Or even go search out individuals that have already built out solar systems, like you're saying, on their roofs in New Mexico, and the price they're getting to sell that back to the grid is embarrassing. So you tell them, hey, I'll give you more than that, and I'll just put a miner over here, and it turns on when you'd otherwise be selling it back to the grid.
Yep.
Does I know there's a lot of talk of like smart meters coming for households. Does that help with any of this metering stuff?
Well, I could imagine you have. Go ahead, Boulder.
No, I don't know anything on that.
I was gonna say I could imagine that you have like a management system for your miners where you're also taking into account all of the other things that are consuming energy in your household, and then you're automatically adjusting the amount of power consumed by the miners in order to never pass whatever that peak threshold is that like makes your electricity prices unaffordable because of the demand charge. So what we were talking about earlier, that like if you just randomly run some high energy device or appliance for 5 minutes, then the energy supplier is going to charge you as if you were running that thing for the entire month or whatever it was. Then it would kind of make sense to have like your all of your appliances and everything that consumes a significant amount of energy tied into the same management system as your miners, so that you can like use your miners as kind of a demand response in your own little household. Like if you're running your air conditioner, then you run your miners at 800 watts instead of 1600 or something like that.
I mean, I think my perspective is a little bit different than most people. When I hear smart meters, I like cringe a little bit because like it's like more surveillance coming in now. Now it's coming in through the power.
Right. And you have to ask the internet in order to turn off your lights or turn on your fridge or whatever. And if your internet goes out or the power goes out, then you're just screwed.
So guys, I mean, we're an hour and 47 minutes in here. I think it's been a very productive conversation. I think we went really far into the weeds because, you know, I had no idea really what was going on the majority of the time. I was just trying my best and learning along the way, which is usually my favorite type of dispatch. So kudos to you all on that. Do you guys have other topics you want to discuss here, or?
I guess I have one for Sovereign's been asking a question. I don't know. I don't know if there's more questions, but I think that would be a good way to finish this up. It sounds like Sovereign, I think what you're asking is there a way to have brains have multiple tuning profiles and be able to adjust those on the fly? And there's not a way to do that right now, but I think in the future, as we, you know, as you taper up and down your mining draw to like offset things in your house, you know, if you need more power for your household, you tune it down. If you need less, you tune it up. That would be a really cool feature to add to brains, and it'd allow you to do a lot of cool things like you know, use your miner to heat your house and have it tune up and down to match a heat instead of match a specific power draw. So yeah, this doesn't exist yet. I think that answers the question that you're asking about. If you can auto tune for all the different profiles.
Well, I mean, I think he's specifically asking in terms of the situation where, like, you're running solar, you have a subsidy, and you're selling back to the grid, and you're trying to, instead of sell back to the grid, use it yourself. So that's case, not very easy to do.
Yeah, so in that case, you would want to tune your miner up and down, like draw more power when there's more solar energy available.
But are you like manually clicking?
Right now, you would have to manually do it. You'd have to code it yourself and use like a Raspberry Pi or something to do it. And you would tell it to just change the amount of power draw you want at any given time. But if there was a way to put that in the firmware to detect how much power your cell's producing, then yes, you could. It would be great if brains could detect that and scale it up and down so that you're matching your power produced with your power draw of the miner.
I think the best approach to that would be is not necessarily powering your miner up or down, but instead diverting the heat into other things. Like, so if you're going to, I don't know. Okay, so the water heater can't be heated all the time. If you live in a cold environment, you can't be just pumping that out to thaw out your driveway all the time or anything like that. Like, I think it would be more advantageous rather than powering your miner up or down is having some sort of, like you said, a Raspberry Pi or something that determines what's been heated enough, what hasn't, where to divert the heat, what needs it, where can it go, and then
I think it all goes hand in hand, because you could scale your miner up and down to get a certain heat threshold for your hot tub, but also maximize the amount of power you're drawing from your solar panels. And I mean, I think that's the direction we're heading. If Bitcoin continues on its path, people are going to try to figure out how to incorporate these things into every household for grid balancing.
It's going to be absolutely amazing, man. I'm so excited to see what people come up with.
I would add to that with the immersion stuff we've seen in the last couple of months, a lot of like open source DIY immersion builds where people are building their own tanks or just like going through the process of setting up an immersion system and documenting it for the public to see. If we're going to have something like we've been talking about, where you can take into account like having different energy sources and different amounts of consumption from other things in your household and all of that, unfortunately, I don't think it will come from brains, because we have limited resources and we need to focus them on serving the largest miners that we can, just from a business perspective. So like committing tons and tons of resources to at-home miners in this scenario just probably isn't going to make sense.
Do you know
not anytime soon.
Do you know what your breakdown is? Like,
in terms of like resource allocation?
No, not in terms of resource allocation. I know you know what that breakdown is. Slush pool is predominantly considered the pleb pool. It is considered the pool that, Ronan, when he gets really drunk, he decides to tweet out that he wants to start his own pool. And every response to it is, but we already have slush. Do you know what the breakdown is between like small scale, maybe, I guess I would say like under a petahash versus over a petahash, like what that breakdown is?
I don't know exactly in those terms. I know that we have approximately 10 or 11,000 miners in total on the
I thought
pool.
you have higher than that. Doesn't it actually tell me how many you have? It's like 16,000 or something.
I hadn't checked.
Like,
the average is 1,000 miners per miner, like 1,000 machines per miner.
Right. We have 182,312 active workers. Oh, wow. Yeah. 17,150 active users. That doesn't tell us exactly.
If you don't have 1,000 miners, you're not in a pleb pool.
Oh, because it tells you 17,000 active users and then 182,000 active workers. And the workers are
the actual
each miner is a worker.
As far as I know, that number is not necessarily 100% accurate, because I don't think that we can recognize when people are using like aggregation proxies. So if a mining farm has 100 machines, but they're using a proxy in between their farm and the connection with the pool, then it can appear as like one machine to us. I don't know how common that is. So it could be that that's not very common, or that we have some way of still seeing how many, like we have monitoring services as part of the pool. So it kind of makes sense for people to connect each individual worker if they want to have that monitoring service. But there's a lot of farms that have like their own farm management and monitoring third-party service, where they wouldn't need to use the pool.
So, I mean, Daniel, you can tell me to go fuck myself, but I'm curious, like your gut, what does your gut say percentage-wise, the amount of people using your pool that are under a petahash? Or is like 20%, 15% or something?
The amount of users under a petahash, I would guess, is like over 50%.
So,
Or
Ronan,
right
you wouldn't
around
consider that a pleb
50%.
pool?
No, those numbers don't add up.
The hash is what matters.
Because if there's, I look at
If
the
we're talking
workers, though.
about
If there's
if we're talking
100,
about users, then it's much different from, like, I would guess that at least 80% of our hash rate comes from maybe 10 mining entities.
there you go.
But
That's what I'm
if
talking
you
about.
tell me, like, how many of our users, what portion of that 17,000 active users has less than a petahash, I would guess it's like something in the 50% plus range, because there's so many miners with like 1 or 2 S9s or just one S17 or M20S connected to Slush. So
Yeah, and then I have a bunch of different accounts that have.
Yeah, but Ronan, I mean, if you notice there, you're above pleb status because I said petahash is the limit.
God. Yeah, no, but what I mean,
So you're a
what I
suit
mean,
now.
though, what I mean though is if 80% is controlled by 10 entities, that's not really a pleb pool.
Yeah, I mean, if you're renting out subways and using them to fucking mine, like, I don't know if you're a pleb anymore.
Oh, that cuts deep.
So Ronan, when are you going to launch a mining
I
pool?
I don't knock Slush. That's where I tell everyone to go. The pleb pool thing, it was started as a joke, and I don't actually plan on ever doing that anytime soon. But I mean, come on. Sounds like
I think
idea.
there
else
are
you
pools with double our hash rate and maybe 15% of our users. Like for sure in a from a relative standpoint, we are by far the closest thing that exists to a pleb pool.
I agree, and that was my entire point when I say stuff like that. Is without Slush, if something happens to Slush pool, I'm a devout Slush pool guy. I really am. I show you guys more than probably any other product in the entire industry. My concern is if something happens to you guys, where are we going to go? There's nowhere else to go. There has to be alternatives.
Yeah, it's
we
an
love
issue.
you, Neil. Yeah, hopefully other pools are. I'm kind of concerned with the North American pools.
Yeah,
being like a much more regulated entities than we are, and then like
you have to like go to a dinner party in order to be a part of their pool.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't like that at all. Leave it up to Matt to take advantage of me when I'm sick. only time he knows that he can get a shot in.
Ronan, literally every single one of us, 15 claws deep, has had the idea for a pleb pool. So don't let it hurt you too much.
Claws deep.
No, yeah, the North American pools are a concern, right, Dan?
Yeah, like there's reason to celebrate the Chinese mining ban in terms of decentralization. It was definitely a much bigger attack surface having more than 50% of the hash rate in China. But that said, like there was no chance that China was ever going to come in and start telling pools, don't mind these transactions, only these ones are okay. And if you don't do it, then we're going to arrest your executives and blah, 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 and shut down your service. Like, obviously, the Chinese government is not friendly to pools, and pools they're now being blocked by the Great Firewall, and they're having all kinds of issues. Every pool that had their domain registered in China is screwed right now and like trying to figure out solutions. But I don't think that China was ever going to be censoring transactions and really like regulating pools. So I'm happy to see a large portion of hash rate moving to North America and the US in particular, and happy to see mining pools growing in North America. But I don't want to see them get more than 50% either. Like what would be really great, and I don't expect it to happen. I don't know really how it would happen, but it would be great if there was like a pool in South America and a pool in Asia somewhere besides China, and like those pools had significant enough portions of hash rate that if anything were to happen with any other jurisdiction, then miners could just migrate over and everything would be fine. I think once we get into any pools having more than 50%, then we better have some Stratum v2 adoption, or else that is some like non-negligible attack vector.
Well, and I mean, it's more than just a single pool getting over 50%. Like,
Right.
if we have like a couple regulated U.S. pools together being
combined 50%, yeah.
It starts. I mean, at 50%, it doesn't necessarily become a concern fully in terms of censoring transactions. I mean, you still have 49%. If you're talking 51%, you still have 49% of miners that will include your transaction, especially if you pay a higher fee. But the higher it goes, the more of a concern it is. And ultimately, like, I fucking love this country, but we're the land of KYC. We're the place that, you know, shut down BitMEX and fucks around with Kraken and stuff and makes it so that you go to a website and it's like North Korea, Iran, and fucking America can't access this website. That's us. We do that. So it definitely is a concern, and all the rah around American hash is, and I mean, a lot of the American hash is concentrated in Texas, so it's even more. It's not even just like a federal government you have to worry about. You also have to worry about the individual states.
Yeah, and it's the big advantage for Chinese miners was their proximity to hardware manufacturers. The big advantage for American miners and Canadian miners to a lesser extent is the access to capital markets. And as long as, especially like publicly traded miners, like shout out to Grid, they just announced a SPAC that they're doing for $3.3 billion. But like miners in the US are the only ones doing that, and Canada, like Bitfarms and Hut 8 in Canada. But for the most part, it's like publicly traded mining companies in the US have such easier access to capital than anybody else that they're going to be able to scale really, really rapidly. And like, even if there's really cheap energy available in other parts of the world, which there certainly is, for those miners to compete, they're going to need access to capital at least like somewhat similar capacities as the miners in North America. So this is like, I've been in South America for most of this year and finishing out the year here. And that's like one of my focuses is going to be trying to figure out how to serve the miners of Paraguay and Brazil and Argentina and all these countries down here who, like, they may have abundant energy, but they're going to have a much harder time financing hardware purchases and infrastructure build-outs. But we're going to need them in order to maintain this decentralization now that there's not the two big hubs with China and the US, assuming that mining doesn't ever return to China, or at least not in the near future, which I'm not so sure about. I wouldn't be surprised at all if there is a significant amount of hash rate in China again in the near future. But we can't assume that there will be. And with that, we definitely it would be nice to see South American miners scaling. To a lesser extent, there's even hope for miners in Africa emerging. We already know some, like there's miners in the Congo, but maybe we could see, like, for example, Ethiopia has 4 major rivers and a ton of potential for hydropower, where we could see like Ethiopia becoming a major Bitcoin mining hub. But it's so much harder to build a business in Ethiopia and like to have the risk management to know that you're going to actually receive the ASICs if you try to ship them across those borders, to know that nobody's going to come and try to like shoot up your security and steal all the ASICs and all of that type of stuff. So like, yeah, I think there's a lot of things working against decentralization globally now, and that's what I hope that we can see El Salvador be successful with mining, and a lot of other countries.
That's what I was just going to suggest, was a Salvadorian mining pool. I mean, we have we have a lot of people
That
that
would
are
be
very
cool.
supportive of that would point their hash rate at something like that. And I'm not talking like competing with slush pool or anything like that. Like that's not my plebe pool idea. It's just the
Pleb pool.
each their own. It's just something that I think that could really work. And if you wanted to go to El Salvador, I'm sure that they would. I mean, there's plenty of Salvadorians down there that are very, very apt to do all the things that you need. You can hire regardless of where I was going with that is, I think that's a prime place. Matt, you son of a bitch! I might just have to go do it now.
I share your
downer,
thought. That's all. Sorry.
It's just like we've seen over the years, like since I joined Brains, I've heard, can't count how many times like somebody's starting a pool and so few of them materialize. And then even the ones that do materialize, I think probably a few of them have buyer's remorse. Like running a pool is extremely technically difficult. Like it's not something that you can just decide to do and then 6 months later you're going to have a working pool.
Sounds
It's
like a
super
challenge.
difficult. Yeah, and then financing it competitively, like you need you need to have deep reserves in order to compete with all the other pools that are offering like very low fees and full paper share.
That's why I would go after a
payouts.
government. That's why I would go after a government to support it.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
there's massive economies of scale, right? And that's why you see the successful new pools usually are people like Marathon, where they have, they have access to capital markets. They have a shit ton of hash themselves. So they create a pool. They're the main miner of that pool. And then they try and encourage other people to join it through rebates or whatever.
Right.
And I mean, that is what, has always been one of the major concerns, right? Which is pool centralization. This idea that there are legitimate incentive issues in terms of economies of scale when it comes to running a pool.
But if you had a government subsidizing the whole thing,
then you're a fucking government lackey. Like, why am I going to
That's-
support your government pool, bro?
That's the key word, though. Like the only way to do it basically is to have it subsidized. Whether it's being subsidized by, like, pools are loss leading businesses now. Like we've focused so heavily on the firmware because the firmware is like incentives are aligned. We're not a middleman just taking a fee and offering a service. We're actually like helping miners make more money. So for us to take a fee there, it's like more of a win-win situation. Whereas pools are becoming more and more of just a like, use our pool so that you also use our financial platform, or use our pool so that you also use XYZ other service, which is where we actually make money.
Yeah,
And so
that's why I continuously shill slush pool, is that you don't see, or I don't see, other pools coming out with products that are actually bettering mining. Like they're just taking their rake and doing their thing. Like
yeah.
I mean, slush is, anyone who's done any kind of research. I mean, you guys are the real deal, and I really do appreciate you. All jokes aside, very grateful to have slush here. We'd be in a way worse situation. It'd be nice if people that had micro BT, what's miners, could participate in Stratum V2, but that's just a little bit of a nitpick.
Soon TM.
Yeah, 2 weeks. Guys, I mean, this has been a fantastic conversation. We're a little over 2 hours. I really did appreciate it. I think we should probably wrap up here. When we wrap up, I like to finish with some final thoughts. So let's do that. Final thoughts. We'll start with Dan. What are your final thoughts?
I would just say, if you have any possibility of mining at home, find some ways to make it work, whether it's like reusing the heat or using some more sophisticated strategy to optimize the amount of electricity that you're consuming. But like the plebs really are the backbone of Bitcoin, and having more people involved in mining. It's been really great to see the past year how many people have been just educated about Bitcoin mining that used to not understand a thing about it. And the best way to get to learn more is to just get an S9 and plug it in and start troubleshooting and hashing with it. So I recommend anybody who's got the itch to do that, just go for it.
Thank you, Dan. Neil, Ronan Miner, final thoughts.
I just want to thank everyone. I love everyone in this community. And I mean, whether it's my personal life or what goes on in Bitcoin or whatever, everyone's been so supportive of everything that we do. It's crazy. It's crazy to know so many people that are just such good people. That's it.
Thank you, Neil. I just wanted to say, I'm very happy you found your dog kitten. My whole family was worried about it, so it's just really great to see you guys reunited.
Thanks, man.
Big Kuna. Actually, fuck you, Big Kuna. Boulder, final thoughts.
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely check and see about the different power consumption rates of different areas and packages you could buy, and look into that, because that's definitely something that I didn't look that far into. So I'll look into that a little bit more in the future.
Thank you, Boulder. Boulder, let's we're gonna do another mining thing I want to do constant mining panels on Dispatch, and you should definitely join us in the future. I would love that. That'd be great.
Yep, you should also post more content online. I'd love to learn some more from someone who's working working right with electricity.
He's getting me back. Big Kuna, final thoughts.
Yeah, don't be afraid to call your power provider. There's a lot of different ways out there that you can get cheaper rates that you might not know about. It's either out there in the public, or you can call and they'll walk you through it. And then I'm just looking forward to Bitcoin mining being used to regulate demand in the household and on the grid as a whole. This has been fun.
Thank you, Kuna. I appreciate you. Freaks, I hope you found this conversation helpful. If it was way over your head, consider listening to Citadel Dispatch 31. That's citadeldispatch.com/CD31, where we start from the basics on Bitcoin mining. There'll be a lot more Bitcoin mining content here, mostly focused on home mining, because fuck the suits. Also, I will be at the Nashville Bitcoin meetup on December 8th, and the whole focus there will be on mining. We have Econo Alchemist, multiple time guest on the show, and Diverter, also a guest on the show and a good friend who will be there. Consider stopping by if you are in the area. You can look up Nash Bitcoiners on Twitter. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us. I truly do appreciate you guys. This was a very good conversation. Like I said earlier, the conversations where I'm in over my head are the ones I enjoy the most on Dispatch. That is kind of the point of the show to begin with. And I want to thank the Freaks for joining us again for another Bitcoin Tuesday. I really do love you all. Neil is telling me in the private chat that he cannot make the National Bitcoin meetup, and I do forgive you, Neil. Thank you, Big Kuna. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Boulder. Thank you, Daniel. Really do appreciate you guys. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers. Thanks, Freaks. Thanks, Matt.
Love you, Freaks. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Reminder that you can support the show. You can support Dispatch by buying a hat that are now in stock. citadeldispatch.com/stack. There's also links there to buy pins from BTC Pins, Ride or Die Freak. And you can also buy a flask at citadeldispatch.com/stack. Those proceeds also go to open source development. I appreciate you all. We will have Rabbit Hole Recap on Thursday at 1 Eastern, which is 1800 UTC. And we will have another dispatch on Tuesday. I'm not sure on the time yet. That's going to be with the Nodal guys. We're going to be talking about the Nautilito, their new, very cheap node product. So be sure to check that out. And once again, if you're considering going to Bitcoin 2022 in Miami, April 6th through 9th, I am heavily involved with that event. It's going to be an absolutely massive event, Bitcoin only. There's a music festival at the end, but the big thing that I'm really excited about is this open source stage that's like 2,000 people. If it was by itself, it'd be like one of the largest conferences for open source development, maybe the largest. I have a discount code for you. You cannot share it on Twitter. I do not get a cut from it, so it's higher than all the other discount codes. So you're not allowed to share it on Twitter, and that code is open source. So if you are going to go, use that code. It applies to all tickets. I love you all. Stay humble and stack.
Question for you, quick.
We're still live, but yes.
That's fine. Is there going to be another one of these mining in Nashville?
Yeah, I mean, the plan is right now, like the way the National Bitcoin meetup is working is going through topics. So there was one on privacy, there was one on self-custody, this one's on mining. I'm not sure what the next one's on, but I mean, there's many months in the year, like there's definitely going to be another mining one. I mean, mining's such a massive part of it. So you should join us for the next mining one.
Yeah, I'm bummed out, man. I even had the days off, and then it was like, okay, can't go, I guess.
You know, Neil, since like it's just me, you, and the Ride and Dies, like you want to talk about Compass for a little bit?
Okay.
Did you see this guy's question? Imal 101? Like I felt bad that we didn't answer his question.
So is having your miner hosted at Compass not a good idea as home mining? No, it is certainly not. Very, very perfect example of not your keys, not your coins. So sure, you're mining your own wallet, but at the same time, you spent a tremendous amount of money on a miner. Like $10,000 is or more is a lot of money to anyone. I don't care how much money you have. $10,000 to $15,000 is
a lot of fucking money.
And you can't know whether or not that those miners are secured or not. You can't know whether or not what they're doing with your miner unless they can send you a live video of your serial numbered miner running, which probably wouldn't prove anything anyway.
But even if they could do that, I mean, in a week they could just take the miner and sell the miner if they wanted to. I mean, there's no way to really verify it. There's a trust relationship there.
Yeah, and it's not one that I would do with a company that's so new because you really don't know what they're doing. They could be hypothecating. They could be doing a lot of things.
The point is you're adding trust to the equation. You're adding a trusted third party.
And the whole reason to be mining is so that you can take trust out of it and take KYC out of it, and all the other things that get you into mining are completely up in smoke. Like you're not mining to get rich unless you
wait. We're not doing that.
Well, we're always going to get rich, but but if you're taking if you're giving your money to a third party, you might as well just be buying Bitcoin because that's going to accelerate faster.
Well, no, to me, I mean, so with Compass, I mean, you have cheaper electricity, you're getting a cheaper power rate, and you're getting easier I think mining is easier than people expect, but it is easier than necessarily mining yourself. So you're getting that aspect out of it. Compared to mining, with the trade-off being that you're trusting a third party that could fuck you at any moment. And you're not just trusting them, you're also trusting whoever they're hosting with and whatever country they're hosting in. So like Compass, for instance, has like Russian warehouses. Like you're not only trusting Compass, you're not only trusting the warehouse owner, but you're also trusting the Russian government not to fuck around. But compared to buying Bitcoin, I mean, the Compass doesn't have, even if you use a credit card, the KYC is different than if you are buying Bitcoin straight up, right? Because you're paying with credit card and they don't know your UTXOs, right? Because your miner is connected to Slush or another pool, and then that pool is sending it out. So they have to collaborate to know your UTXOs. If you're using something like Cash App, you're giving your full ID information, more ID information than you're giving with Compass, and you're like scanning your face and shit, and then they know all of your withdrawal addresses, period.
Okay.
So
right
it's a little bit, there's another trade-off there as well.
So yeah. I would be curious on how exactly, like, say that your miner doesn't necessarily exist there. I'm just running a
like the Ponzi scheme scenario.
Yeah, like they're selling your miner to pay people that came in before you, and then they'll sell their miners to pay people that come in after you, just to catch up to what they may or may not have to do. They can't really pay your address, except for when it comes to that thing where they were giving people $500 a month to delay their miners going online for another month.
But that was a credit to more miner purchases.
So that miner you bought from me, I'm not putting that online yet this month. I got to delay that a month, but I'll give you $500
for another miner. But you can get the miners shipped to you. I know people have successfully gotten them shipped to them.
Okay.
They seem to be shipping out miners if you ask them to ship them to you. I would say, like, if I was in a Compass delayed scenario, I would just have it shipped to me. Fuck it.
I think that they would rather ship the miner to you at this point.
Yeah, they don't want to deal with
because if they have power constraints, they would much rather get the miner off their books. They cancel whatever contract they had with you for energy costs and all of that.
We're adding listeners because people realize we're still talking now.
This is the what's that? The post alpha or whatever.
I mean, it's kind of great. Like all of a sudden, people are like, "Fuck!" Like I might have to stay till after the music video.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Now you can start monetizing the music videos that you play. It's like, hey,
I mean, I'm doing the exact opposite. I get flagged for every music video because I don't have permission to play them. But this is not a monetized show. There's no ads or anything. So I like to end it with a nice fucking rip.
Oh, my bottle doesn't have a cork on it. It has a screw top.
Dude, you never buy screw tops.
It's Crown Royal.
Fair enough. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like you're trusting a third party, so you're adding third party risk to your mining operation. And I honestly think like this infatuation with low electricity costs. I mean, I know we just had a whole conversation on low, like trying to decrease your power costs, which you absolutely should do, is not as important as just getting off of zero in terms of mining in the first place.
I also try to explain to people exactly that with efficiency. Like, okay, an S9 compared to the efficiency of an S19, yeah, that's substantial. That's something you should think about. but like the different, like we were talking about, you can have the same model of miner, an M32 and a 46 terahash, or an M32 and a 62 terahash, or whatever you want to call them. They're the same model. They have different terahashes. They probably have different efficiencies, and then people like try to calculate all of that out, and it's like, so I did the difference. 102 terahash, what's miner? 110 terahash, S19J Pro. Like you were talking efficiency wise, if you did it per terahash, it was like 3 cents a day. It's like, so who cares? Like at that point, like of course, if you're running a mining farm or you have any substantial amount of miners running, that means something. But when you're running half a dozen miners or even a dozen miners, like you're talking, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money that plebes don't have to be built up. Either or. And so 3 cents a day times 12, or we'll call it 10. So that's 30 cents a day. Who cares? You're making so much money anyways. It's not really that big of a deal. Like, don't worry about efficiency unless you're running thousands and hundreds or thousands of machines. I'm living in a goddamn quarantine house right now.
Yeah, dude, get better soon, man.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us. I mean, I always appreciate you joining, and I'm sorry you won't be at the Nashville Bitcoin meetup.
I was flattered to be invited, for one, and I am heartbroken to not be able to make it, for two. Like, I already had days off and shit. I was already planning on going.
Well, I appreciate you not giving everyone their COVID, and including myself. And I hope to see you again soon, my dude.
Yeah, we'll meet up again, man. Take it.
You have any final thoughts for the freaks now that you're an established guest? You stayed later.
No, just do what you think is right. Everyone kind of already knows what's right. Help people. Fucking answer questions. If you're a freak, you already know more than most people, and there's no reason that you ignore people's questions or anything like that. Like, just fucking talk to people. That's all they need, is a helping hand.
Fuck yeah. I appreciate you, brother.
Yeah.
Before we go, actually, one more thing. Did you see that Compass, if you're still delayed, Compass is offering a free year of hosting? Do you think that's enough?
Oof. I didn't even know that. What do you think about that?
I think that's a pretty generous offer.
Why would they do that?
Because they completely fucked over those people that are still waiting.
I had no idea. I kind of forgot about that saga.
Yeah. Anyway, I appreciate you, brother. I hope to see you again soon. To Neil, to Ronan Miner, give Kitten a kiss from me, and to the freaks, stay humble and stack sats. Love you all.
Yep. Love you all.